So about a year ago, I took a trip to Boston, and the main reason I did this is because I am obsessed with Fallout 4. In case you didn't know, Fallout 4 takes place in an alternate timeline, retro-futuristic, post-nuclear apocalyptic Boston, Massachusetts. But a lot of locations in game are based off real-life locations. I went to a lot of these, so I'm going to go to the game location and then show you a picture of the real-life version and tell you a little bit about it. Yeah, do I really need to explain more? Okay, so my journey began when I landed at Boston Airport. There really isn't much to say here other than I was disappointed at the lack of an airship floating above me. Anyway, the first stop on this trip was a quick drive up to Salem, where the most notable thing is the Salem Witch Museum. You can find this in-game, and there's a neat little quest that tries to scare you, and depending on what mods you're using, it may actually succeed.
I'm gonna get ya! Because I'm wild!
But in the real museum, you learn about the Salem witch trials, which happened in the late 1600s. Over 200 people were accused of being witches and practicing dark magic, and 30 were found guilty, with many being executed by hanging. None of these people, mostly women, actually practiced witchcraft or any sort of magic, but were accused by members of their own community and put on trial. You see this story told through a show with mannequins, much like the ones found in game, with a voiceover going through the story. Takes like an hour to go through, and I'd recommend it if you're visiting the area. On the next day of my trip, I watched a baseball game at Fenway Park, which in-game is called Diamond City. I think partially because Bethesda couldn't get the legal rights to use the name Fenway anywhere in the game. Fenway Park is the oldest Major League Baseball stadium still in use today, as it was built in 1912. One of the most notable features that sets it apart from other stadiums is the Green Monster, or, as it was called through most of its history, the Wall. This wall is famous for being more difficult to hit home runs over as compared to other stadiums. In the apocalypse of Fallout 4, baseball isn't as high of a priority to Bostonians as safe shelter, so the stadium has become the largest settlement in the Commonwealth. There's a ton of details and Easter eggs all over the place, but I'll share a few notable ones. There's a red seat where the longest home run was hit in the stadium that can be found in the stands both in real life and in the game. Ted Williams hit the 502-foot home run in 1946, which landed in the hat of a spectator sitting in seat 21. Ever since, the lone seat is kept empty, even during the busiest of games. Every World Series the Red Sox won is displayed at the top of the stadium, but notably, between 1918 and 2004, Boston didn't win a single World Series title. But, since the Fallout timeline diverges from our world in the 1950s, the curse of the Bambino was never broken, and this is reflected in-game when you look above the entrance. After watching a game at Fenway, I went to Castle Island to see Fort Independence, or, as it's known in Fallout 4, the Castle. This fort dates all the way back to the Revolutionary War era. It was closed on the day I went there, so I wasn't able to see inside, but I got some great pictures of the castle walls which, unlike in the game, are still standing. And there weren't any giant mutated lobsters to worry about, so that was nice. Anyway, one of the most notable stories of this fort revolves around the death of Lieutenant Robert F. Massey, who was killed in a sword duel, over a dispute in a card game, with Lieutenant Gustavus Drain on Christmas Day, 1817. According to legend, the soldiers at the fort were so upset with Drain for killing Massey that they walled him up in the fort behind bricks, never to be seen again. Years later, poet Edgar Allan Poe would serve at the very same fort, and upon hearing about this legend, he would be inspired to write The Cask of Amontillado, a short story where a man takes revenge on another by luring him into the cellar with the promise of Amontillado wine, before chaining him to the wall and slowly entombing him brick by brick. Back in Fallout 4, in the lower levels of the castle, we find the remains of the previous Minutemen general in a room, next to a case of Amontillado wine, which upon closer inspection reveals the name P. Edgar. And turning around, we find a chained up skeleton behind a crumbling brick wall, which appears to be hundreds of years old. It was at this point in my vacation that I decided I should go back to doing the main quest, which led me to Boston Common to begin walking the Freedom Trail. This is a red brick trail that goes through downtown Boston to many of the most notable historical landmarks. In Fallout 4, the quest Follow the Freedom Trail leads you to the worst faction in the game, the Railroad. Taking this walking tour through Boston was probably the most surreal experience I've had in a while. I've done this quest so many times in game, and even though Fallout 4 isn't one-to-one accurate, seeing these real-life locations I visited in the game was just really cool. The Boston Common is much bigger in real life than it is in game, and the swan boats are still there. The trail starts here, and you can see the first of these markers, which indicate each stop on the trail. You also walk past Park Street Subway Station, another important stop in Fallout 4's main quest. Now, there's a lot of stops in this trail, and I don't really have time to go into detail about each one, but I'll make sure to mention all the ones that appear in-game. First is the Massachusetts State House, a golden domed building that serves as the seat of government for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Next is the Granary Burial Ground, which is a graveyard for many Americans, most notably the family of Benjamin Franklin, who was born in Boston and buried in Philadelphia. Next up is Old Corner Bookstore, which I entirely missed because it is now a Chipotle. After this is the Old State House, but in-game it appears before the bookstore, strangely. Anyway, this was the seat of the colonial government from 1713 to 1776. On March 5th, 1770, the Boston Massacre occurred right outside this building, and today the spot is indicated with a stone marker on the ground. In Fallout 4, the area around this building has become a town called Goodneighbor, a safe haven for the misfits of the Commonwealth.
I'm a woman, baby. Can't you tell?
Faneuil Hall is right around the corner, kinda, and this location has been a marketplace for hundreds of years, and I noticed a sign on the outside of the building showing that this building is a designated fallout shelter. Honestly, a missed opportunity by Bethesda to not put a vault underneath this building. Now, this isn't a location in Fallout 4, but I visited the slide that a police officer got injured on, which now has a sign saying no adults allowed. Bear with me, we're almost done, as we've now reached Paul Revere's house. It's a grey house, and I don't really have much to say about it, but hey, look, it's Old North Church, with its statue of Paul Revere on horseback. You see, when Paul Revere made his midnight ride on April 18th, 1775, this church hung 2 lanterns in the steeple to alert the citizens that the British were coming by sea before the battles of Lexington and Concord. The church in-game is pretty destroyed, but you can still see the similarities. The railroad faction makes their base here, and most players stop following the trail at this point, but let's keep going, as the last 2 locations definitely stand out, both in-game and in real life. After walking a whole mile from the church, I made it to the USS Constitution, the oldest commissioned naval warship to still be floating. This ship is nicknamed Old Ironsides due to the observation that the ship survived many cannon shots, as if the sides were made of iron. This ship is still in service in the US Navy, though many but not all of its parts have been replaced over the years. In Fallout 4, the side quest Last Voyage of the USS Constitution is a fan favorite, whereupon we find the ship atop a destroyed building with rockets attached to the hull. The crew is made up of military robots ready to be called upon if need be. After doing some short quests for the robot named Ironsides and fighting off some pesky scavengers, you get to watch this ship fly across the Boston Harbor into a skyscraper. And last but not least is the Bunker Hill Monument, an obelisk that marks the site of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Upon climbing the excruciating 294 steps to the top, you are rewarded with one of the best views of the Boston skyline. In Fallout 4, this location is a trade hub, an unlockable settlement, and where the quest, the Battle of Bunker Hill, takes place. Honestly, I think Bethesda should have been more creative with the name of this quest. At least call it the second Battle of Bunker Hill or something. Come on, Todd. Anyway, that is all the locations I visited in real life which have been created for Fallout 4's Commonwealth. I have also visited the Greenbrier Hotel, known as the White Springs in Fallout 76, as well as Washington, D.C., though it's been many years, and it was before I was a fan of Fallout. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I know there are other videos covering this topic, but I wanted to share some history, as well as some facts about the game along the way. If you think the Railroad is the worst faction, please leave a like, and if you like Fallout, please subscribe. Amontillado wine.